All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the really tense situation between the United States and Venezuela. Our source material suggests these two countries are getting dangerously close to a major conflict.
And let's just start with this, a pretty powerful plea from Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro. It's interesting because in a rare move, he actually switched to English to get this message out there, saying no crazy war, as things get more and more heated.
And that plea for peace? Well, it comes at a time when our source material, citing some credible reports, says the United States has already fully prepared for a war, moving its military machine into position all around Venezuela.
So, what does that preparation actually look like on the ground? Well, according to the source, the signs are pretty clear, and they point to a very deliberate and significant military positioning.
Yeah, we're talking about the whole package here. The source says a full military force. We're talking an aircraft carrier, Marines, Army, Air Force has basically set up a perimeter around the country. It's what the source calls a classic show of force.
And look, this isn't just some wild speculation. The source is quick to point out that even former top officials like Defense Secretary Leon Panetta are on the record talking about the real possibility of war, saying it could start out as a small-scale thing.
Okay, so how is a potential war being justified? Any military action needs a public reason, a story. And the one being put forward here, according to the source, is all about a very specific threat.
So, the official story coming from the administration is that this is about a war on drugs. The narrative is that the U.S. has to step in to stop deadly drugs from flowing out of Venezuelan cartels and into America.
And to really hammer that point home, the source flags a truly startling number from a claim attributed to Donald Trump, that 300 million Americans died just last year from drugs coming out of Venezuela.
Now, let's just pause on that number for a second. To put that into perspective, the entire population of the U.S. is about 330 million. So a loss of 300 million would mean nearly 90% of everyone in the country was wiped out in 1 year.
So as you can imagine, that justification is getting a lot of pushback. Our source points out that even news outlets considered friendly to the administration have called the whole idea simply incorrect. They note that the fentanyl crisis is mainly tied to China and trafficking through Mexico, not Venezuela.
And that skepticism really leads us to the heart of the matter, to a huge question the source material poses. If the official drug story doesn't add up, what else could be driving this massive military buildup?
Well, the source suggests that maybe we should be looking at a different kind of resource, one that's a lot more valuable on the world stage than drugs.
And here it is. According to the source, Venezuela is sitting on top of the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. I mean, just look at this chart. That's more oil than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, and way more than the U.S. itself.
So, the alternative theory presented in the source is that this is really all about the oil. With energy prices going up around the world, the idea is that controlling those reserves could be worth billions to U.S. companies, whether that's through some kind of forced deal or, direct intervention.
But this kind of tension doesn't just stay between two countries. The source material shows how this pressure cooker situation is starting to spill over, pulling in neighboring countries and really shaking up old alliances.
And that brings us to Colombia. They share a huge border with Venezuela and have, for a very long time, been one of America's closest allies in Latin America. But lately, that relationship has started to crack.
So here's what the source says went down. It started when Colombia's president publicly criticized President Trump. Then, he flat out refused to get involved in any military action against Venezuela, saying he wouldn't drag his people into a war. The reaction to that was fast and harsh.
Yeah, that refusal was met with just a stunning accusation from the U.S. president, which our source cites. He publicly called the leader of a longtime ally a drug dealer. And according to the source, that was followed up with heavy personal sanctions.
So what happens if things keep escalating and this actually turns into a hot war? Well, the source doesn't mince words on this. It describes any potential conflict as a total squash match.
And you can see exactly why right here. I mean, the difference in military size, in budget, in technology, it's just a massive gap. By pretty much any measurement you can think of, it's a completely uneven fight. And this brings us to a final, really interesting point from our source material. The analysis suggests that Venezuela, kind of like Iraq before it, might be a target for the very reason that it can't really fight back effectively against a superpower, which of course makes it a much lower risk target.
Which leaves us with one last big question from the source. When you're given an official reason for war, like fighting drugs, but there's also this powerful counter-narrative about something like oil, how do any of us figure out what's really going on? It's a question that's at the very heart of understanding these kinds of conflicts.